In most mainline Pokemon games, the player can collect a bicycle to move through the overworld faster. Along with moving faster, players can also use the bike to access areas of the map that would otherwise be inaccessible, such as in Generations 3 and 4. Before knowledge of the bike was widespread, the developers formed a habit of including an area in the games that said, "Hey, you can get a bike in this game, you know, and you need it to enter this area." These areas are the cycling roads, where walking is forbidden and speeding is encouraged. The tradition of including a cycling road area trailed off after Generation 4 for reasons unclear to me, but I would hazard a guess that people just knew about and expected there to be bikes in the games from that point onwards, and thus pointing it out with a dedicated map area was slightly unnecessary. I could be very wrong on that, and if you have any more information, please do let me know. Now, onto the areas themselves. These can be one part or the whole of an entire route, and some of them have a gravity mechanic built in, meaning you automatically travel downwards if no directional buttons are held. In my view, the cycling roads vary quite wildly in what they add to the game and how fun they are to traverse. Pokemon typically does not place much emphasis on movement, but the cycling roads are one of the few areas of the games that put the focus on movement in the overworld. Now, you clicked on the video, you know what's up, but just to give a guide, here are some non-exhaustive criteria for my rankings. I'll be thinking about how much fun it is to ride through each area, what the layout of trainers is like, how the road links to nearby routes, and the design of the road, among other things. I'll also be looking at remakes separately, so instead of the 3 main routes that feature cycling roads, each instance of cycling road will get its own placement, if not equal to another. There are only 3 regions that feature cycling roads, being Kanto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh, so that limits the pool a bit, though each of these regions have featured in multiple games by this point. People will probably have wildly different views on this, but that's part of the fun. If you disagree with me on any of these rankings, please let me know in the comments below and why. Coming in at dead last, Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Now, this same route appears in Red and Blue, the games immediately preceding it, but bafflingly, they made it far shorter and removed half of the trainers. All of the problems why that's bad here, but looking at Cycling Road in a vacuum, it is somewhat of a merit for this route. Still though, I'd really rather go down Generation 1's cycling road than this, and that's saying a lot. Red, Blue, and Yellow, the informal first cycling road comes in at number 6. Folks, this one is just not good. It does establish the concept, it is the originator of the cycling road. But beyond that, it offers us absolutely nothing. As I discussed in my most recent video, I think it is marginally better than Southeast Kanto, but both are bad. The downhill biking is unique and it has that going for it, but the reverse, having to bike uphill for any reason, is absolutely miserable. And you might reasonably say, why would you bike uphill? Perhaps you missed an item, or there was a trainer you wanted to fight, or you just wanted to simply ride your bike to Celadon. Don't bother, as it would be faster to reset the save file and play through the game to Celadon than it would be to ride back up. Forgot Fly? Too bad, you should have thought of that before you travelled downhill. A quick note on the trainers. I think they're laid out in kind of a fun way in that you can swiftly dodge all of them if you want to, but also they're really accessible if you want to fight all of them. Dodging them on the way down is kind of fun, but overall this is still not a good cycling road. Fire Red and Leaf Green is number 5 here. This cycling road is a disappointment in many ways. It lacks the zeal and creative license that a remake ought to have, but I suppose that could be said for Fire Red and Leaf Green as a whole. It's mostly the same as it was in the originals, not worse like it was in Gold, Silver, and Crystal, but mostly the same. The trainers have been rearranged a bit and they now spin and move back and forth, and that's all well and good, but it's the same. A straight downhill line which is really slow to ride back up. It's a bit disappointing, but it's not like the source material was particularly good. Ranked at 4th equal, Generation 4's cycling roads in Diamond and Pearl and Platinum and Heart Gold and Soul Silver offer a kind of hybrid of the old and new cycling road experiences in one. Let's go over Diamond and Pearl first. Notably, Diamond and Pearl's road is the first and only road that you absolutely must travel through in order to progress through the game, meaning that the bike is also a required item. I have no strong view on this, but it is a distinction from previous cycling roads. The bike here is also a hybrid of the Mark and Acro bikes from Generation 3, and like any hybrid, trades off the strengths of each for a more average experience. You can shift gears on the bike that make it go faster or slower, but it's still much slower than the Mark bike and lacks the Acro bike's eponymous acrobatic abilities of bunny hopping. Like Generation 1 and 2, the cycling road here is a straight downhill line, rather than the tricky cornered path of Generation 3. The gravity mechanics are back, with some confusing changes. Passing the start line on the cycling road will send you hurtling downhill, passing over the foggy valley below at pace. Gravity will take you all the way down the hill, provided that you do not hit the dividing section of tunnels or slam into one of the many trainers here. However, and this perplexes me but also makes life better, you can ride back uphill in the faster gear at the same speed that you can descend the hill. So either the player character is an Olympic level sprint cyclist, or the gravity here doesn't work like regular gravity. This has absolutely no bearing on the gameplay, but it does make me laugh at how absurd it is. The trainers here are arranged in a way that if you dodge one, you immediately run into the next. To be absolutely clear, when I say dodge, I'm not saying that you should avoid all of the battles and have zero encounters in the area, just that the layout here was designed firmly with the word gotcha in mind. The trainers have a variety of Pokemon, mostly flying and electric types, and continue the fine tradition of being actual cyclists instead of motorcycle gang members. Diamond and Pearl are a real mixed bag if I'm honest. I think the best thing here is the visual setting. Rolling down the hill over the top of a verdant, foggy valley below is quite nice, and the dual tunnel split in the middle of the road is really cool. But the fact that it's just a straight line again feels a bit regressive, since the structure of the Generation 3 road proved to be so much fun. The gravity biking is fine, aside from my earlier note about the gravity not actually making sense. It's a definite improvement on the early versions, but doesn't quite match the quality of Generation 3's effort. Moving on to the other two Generation 4 games, Heart Gold and Soul Silver make some pretty drastic visual changes from what appears in Gold, Silver and Crystal and Fire Red and Leaf Green. It's actually quite similar in terms of length to Gold, Silver and Crystal, but it looks a lot more developed and metallic. It actually runs as a bridge over the sea, with metal arches covering the right side, and trainers lined up in a gauntlet style on the way down. The grass patch at the top is a lot smaller, and features the same Pokemon as in Gold, Silver and Crystal. It would have been a nice touch if they'd added or changed some of the available Pokemon here, perhaps included some from Sinnoh Hoenn, but it's no real biggie. There are also way more trainers in this version than in Gold, Silver or Crystal, so that's a plus. Heart Gold and Soul Silver also share the absurd gravity mechanics of Diamond, Pearl and Platinum, with the player utilising their massive rock calves and thighs to power up the hill at the same speed that they descend. The main changes here are making it an actual bridge with steel beams and water running below, and the number of trainers. These are not drastic changes, but make quite a difference, and the vibes are quite good. It's a solid entry into the cycling road canon alongside Diamond, Pearl and Platinum. Next up, coming in at number 3, are the Generation 4 remakes, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. It's not a secret at this point that they quite literally lifted the map out of the originals and ported it in whole to the Switch, and that's reflected here in the cycling road. It is exactly the same, with a new skin slapped on top, so all the things that were good about the original remain, as well as the things that were not so good. The main change actually is that your Pokemon now follows you around in the overworld. I actually find this very entertaining, as you hit a speed going downhill that your Pokemon cannot keep up with, meaning that they eventually drift off screen and get left behind. With particular Mons, this can look really funny as they start sprinting and fail to catch up anyway. In any case, the foggy valley below you still looks nice and adds some scenery, but it's the opposite case of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, where they took the chance to improve on the original instead of opting for a one-to-one replication. This road is good, it's better than the original, but it's hardly very imaginative. I'm still a little conflicted about this placement because, on the whole, I'd rather play Diamond and Pearl or Platinum than the remakes, but in a vacuum, the cycling road is better, so it technically wins out here in the end. Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald come in at number 2. The trainers here have now moved on from the Generation 1 and 2 motorbike gangs and have a different type of theming, which is very cool. It finally makes sense that they are cyclists and not motorbike gangs on Cycling Road. It is bizarre to me that they took 3 generations to get that right, but here we are. The road here is also no longer a straight line, another win for having an interesting landscape where riding a bike could be considered fun. I think this cycling road is also helped quite a bit by the introduction of the Mark bike, which is approximately 1 million times faster than previous bikes. The Mark bike says you can go way faster now, and not only that, you should, because I'm going to time you and have an NPC at the end of the road to tell you how cool you are if you go fast. And boy, does it feel cool to be a 10-year-old riding fast down a cycling road in close to 12.1 seconds and having some guy in sunglasses say, "Hey buddy, seriously cool stuff out there." Alternatively, if you do a terrible job riding the bike, he roasts you and tells you that you shouldn't even have the bike because you can't use it responsibly. There is no babysitting here. If you cannot ride fast, you do not get any swag. Generation 3 Cycling Road here also feels like a cooler segment of the map you have to progress to access. It looms above you as you traverse Route 110, having to fight the rival and a series of other trainers before you can get a bike to access it. And once you do get there, you get a whole bunch of trainers to fight, arranged in a somewhat zany layout. Some of them have weirdly low-leveled Pokemon, which is kind of odd, but overall, this cycling road is excellent, and vastly improves on the early concept. In the top spot is Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I think it's really great that they didn't coast for this one and clearly put some care into it. Given the RSE path was already pretty good, it would have been easy to just replicate that and call it a day, but they did make some effort to make some changes. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire's cycling road shows some wonderful attention to detail. Reflecting the fact that the games came out 12 years after the originals, the cycling road has been updated to make it feel a bit more futuristic. The road is a smooth, glass-paneled path with dashed lines on the barriers. The path changes elevation multiple times during the ride, which I think is really cool. The path is also built well above the route now, making it feel more like you're flying than riding a bike, and is really nice. Also, the front desk in front of the gates is modelled to look like bike chains, which is a beautiful touch. The Mark bike itself is not as fast as the original, but actually feels a bit nicer to ride with the circle pad, now enabling 8 directions of movement while still being pretty fast. The trainers quite easily get in the way of you as you ride, but with some practice you can avoid them, making the challenge of getting a rapid time here rewarding. The guy at the end is just as praising and scathing when he speaks to you. Overall, this is just Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald but better, and nothing else really comes close to this particular cycling road, making it deserving of the Cycling Road Gold Medal. One last note. When I was making this video, I was originally going to include the route in Let's Go, but eventually decided against it, since the bike isn't actually in that game, and thus it cannot really be called Cycling Road. But I would like to say quickly, that route is excellent, and is a fantastic reimagining of that area with a lot of attention to detail and care. Those are the rankings. Did I get any horribly wrong here? Are my general biases of each game reflected too strongly in the rankings? How would you rank the cycling roads? Should they bring them back? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching.